Chapter 12. The Mechanic, the Parrot, and the Fortune Teller. House number 7 on Perelashinsky Lane was far from the finest building in Old Town. Its 2 stories, built in the over-the-top style of the Second Empire, were still decorated with battered lion heads that looked uncannily like the famous writer Artsabashev. There were exactly 8 of these Artsabashev-like faces, one for each window facing the lane, set right into the keystones above the windows. House had 2 other decorations, but these were strictly commercial. On one side, a bright blue sign read, Odessa Bagel Cooperative, Moscow Baranki. The sign showed a young man in a tie and short French trousers, holding a magical cornucopia inside out, from which a cascade of ochre Moscow Baranki tumbled out, ready to be swapped for Odessa bagels as needed. The young man wore a blissful smile. On the other side, a packing company called Quick Pack announced itself to its esteemed clients with a black sign in big gold letters. Despite the obvious differences in their signs and working capital, both these businesses were in the same line of work, hustling all kinds of textiles, coarse wool, fine wool, worsted cotton, and if they got lucky, even some good silk. If you walked through the tunnel-like, shadowy, waterlogged gate and turned right into the courtyard with its cement well, you'd see 2 doors without stoops, opening straight onto the sharp stones of the yard. The right door had a dull brass plate with the name V.M. Polsov engraved in fancy script. The left door had a little white tin sign, Fashions and Hats, but that was just for show. Inside the so-called fashion and hat shop, there was no display, no decor, no headless mannequins standing at attention, no hat blocks for elegant ladies' hats. Instead, in the 3-room apartment lived a spotless white parrot in red underpants. The parrot was tormented by fleas but couldn't complain. He didn't speak human. All day, he gnawed on sunflower seeds and spat the shells through the bars of his tower-shaped cage onto the carpet. All he needed was an accordion and a new pair of squeaky galoshes to look like a down-on-his-luck handyman. Windows were draped with dark brown curtains with shiny spots, and the whole apartment was done up in gloomy brown tones. Above the piano hung a reproduction of Berklin's Isle of the Dead, in a dark green polished oak frame under glass. One corner of the glass had long since fallen out, and the exposed part of the painting was so covered in fly specks that it blended right into the frame. Whatever was happening in that part of the Isle of the Dead was now anyone's guess. In the bedroom, on an iron bed, sat the lady of the house herself. Leaning her elbows on an octagonal table covered with a grimy Richelieu lace cloth, she was laying out cards. Across from her sat Mrs. Gritsitseva, wrapped in a fluffy shawl. "I have to warn you, dear, I don't do readings for less than 50 kopecks a session," the fortune teller said. The widow, who would stop at nothing to find a new husband, agreed to the price. "Just tell me the future, please," she pleaded. "You need to be read as the Queen of Clubs," the fortune teller announced. "I've always been the Queen of Hearts," the widow objected. Fortune teller shrugged and started shuffling the cards. In just a few minutes, she'd sketched out the widow's fate, big and small troubles ahead, a king of clubs weighing on her heart, and a queen of diamonds in cahoots with him. For the real reading, they turned to palmistry. The lines on Mrs. Gritsitsayeva's hand were clean, strong, and flawless. Her lifeline stretched so far it ran into her pulse, and if the line was telling the truth, she'd lived to see the world revolution. Her head and art lines suggested that if she gave up the grocery business, she could gift humanity with masterpieces in any field, art, science, or social studies. Her mounts of Venus looked like Manchurian hills, promising endless reserves of love and tenderness. The fortune teller explained all this in the jargon of graphologists, palmists, and horse traders. "Thank you, madam," said the widow. "Now I know exactly who the king of clubs is, and the queen of diamonds, too, is the king of marriage prospect." "The king, definitely marriage material, dear." Widow left, walking on air. The fortune teller swept the cards into a drawer, yawned, showing the mouth of a 50-year-old woman, and headed to the kitchen. She fussed with lunch on her Gretz kerosene stove, wiped her hands on her apron like a real cook, grabbed a chipped enamel bucket, and went out to the yard for water. There was no plumbing in the house. She shuffled across the yard, heavy on her flat feet. Her sagging bust bounced under her re-dyed blouse. A little tuft of graying hair stuck up on her head. She was almost an old woman, almost dirty, eyed everyone with suspicion, and had a sweet tooth. She'd cook up huge pots of compote and eat it with gray bread all by herself. The parrot watched her eat, half closing his eyes under his gray suede eyelid. She made her way across the yard, and if Ippolit Matveyevich had seen her now, he'd never have recognized Alina Burr, the beautiful prosecutor the court secretary once described in verse as calling for kisses, all light and airy. At the well, Madame Burr was greeted by her neighbor, Viktor Mikhailovich Polsov, a genius mechanic and intellectual, who was filling a can that once held gasoline. Polsov had the face of an opera devil, the kind they'd smear with soot before sending on stage. After exchanging greetings, the neighbors got to talking about the one thing on everyone's mind in Old Town. "Can you believe it?" Polsov said sarcastically. "Yesterday I ran all over town and couldn't find a single 3/8-inch tap, not one, and they're planning to launch the streetcar." Lena Stanislavovna, who knew as much about 3/8-inch taps as a dance student at the Leonardo da Vinci choreography school knows about farming, thinking cottage cheese comes from dumplings, still managed to sympathize. Stores these days, all lines, no goods, and the names. Starjico, what is that? Oh, that's nothing, Elena Stanislavovna. They've still got 4 motors from the Universal Electric Company. Those might work, but the bodies are total junk. The windows aren't even set in rubber. I saw it myself. It'll rattle like crazy. And the rest of the motors are Kharkov made. Pure Statron scrap metal. They won't last a mile. I checked them out. Genius mechanic fell silent, annoyed. His black face gleamed in the sun, the whites of his eyes tinged yellow. Viktor Mikhailovich Polsov was not just a genius mechanic, he was a genius slacker. Among the many backyard tinkerers in Old Town, he was the slowest and most likely to mess up. The reason was his overactive nature. He was a hyperactive slacker, always bubbling over. You could never find him in his own workshop, which was in the second courtyard of number 7 Perelishinsky Lane. Cold, portable forge stood abandoned in the middle of the stone shed, surrounded by punctured inner tubes, shredded triangle tires, huge rusty locks big enough to secure a city-dented gas tanks labeled Indian and Wanderer, a child's broken-down stroller, a dead dynamo, rotten leather belts, oily rags, worn sandpaper, an Austrian bayonet, and piles of bent, torn, and battered junk. Customers could never find Viktor Mikhailovich. He was always off somewhere, busy with something else. He couldn't stand to see a cart horse hauling a load into any yard, his or someone else's. Polsov would immediately come out, hands behind his back, and watch the driver with contempt. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. "Who drives like that?" he'd yell in horror. "Turn it around." The startled driver would turn. "Where are you turning, you blockhead?" Polsov would shout, rushing at the horse. Back in the old days, you'd have gotten a slap for that. After half an hour of bossing people around, Polsov would be about to return to his workshop, where an unrepaired bike pump waited, but then something else would disrupt the peace. Maybe 2 carts would get their axles tangled in the street, and Polsov would show them the best way to untangle them. Or they'd be replacing a telegraph pole, and Polsov would check its verticality with his own plumb line, brought from the shop. Or there'd be a tenants' meeting, and Polsov would bang on an iron plate to summon everyone, but he'd never make it to the meeting. He'd get distracted by a passing fire truck and, burning with excitement, would run after it. Sometimes real work would catch up with Viktor Mikhailovich. For a few days, he'd disappear into his workshop and work in silence. The kids would run wild in the yard, the cart drivers would make whatever turns they wanted, carts stopped getting tangled, and fire trucks and hearses rolled to their destinations unimpeded, because Viktor Mikhailovich was working. Once after one of these work binges, he wheeled out a motorcycle he'd cobbled together from car parts, fire extinguishers, bicycles, and typewriters. The engine was from a Wanderer, the wheels from a Davidson, and the rest had long since lost their brand names. Hanging from the seat was a cardboard sign, "Test." A crowd gathered. Without looking at anyone, Viktor Mikhailovich spun the pedal. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then came a metallic chomp, the machine shook, and a cloud of dirty smoke billowed out. Viktor Mikhailovich leapt onto the seat, and the motorcycle, picking up insane speed, shot through the tunnel to the middle of the street and stopped dead as if shot. He was about to get off and inspect his mysterious contraption when it suddenly went into reverse, carried him back through the tunnel, and stopped in the yard, grumbled, and exploded. Viktor Mikhailovich survived by some miracle, and in his next work binge, he turned the wreck into a stationary engine that looked like the real thing but didn't work. Crowning achievement of the mechanic intellectual's career was the saga of the gates at number 5. The Tenants Association had signed a contract with Viktor Mikhailovich. He was to fix the iron gates and paint them some economical color of his choosing. In return, the association would pay him 21 rubles, 75 kopecks, after a special commission inspected the work. The cost of the official stamps was on him. Viktor Mikhailovich hauled the gates away like Samson. He enthusiastically set to work in his shop. 2 days went into taking the gates apart. The cast iron scrolls ended up in the baby carriage, the iron rods and spears under the workbench. A few more days were spent inspecting the damage. Then disaster struck. A main water pipe burst on Vorobyaninov Street, and Viktor Mikhailovich spent the rest of the week at the scene, shouting at the workers and peering into the hole. When his organizational fervor cooled, he returned to the gates, too late. The neighborhood kids were already playing with the scrolls and spears. When they saw the furious mechanic, they dropped everything and ran. Half the scrolls were missing, never to be found. After that, Viktor Mikhailovich lost all interest in the gates. Meanwhile, at number 5, now wide open, terrible things happened. Wet laundry was stolen from the attics, and one evening, someone even made off with a boiling samovar from the yard. Viktor Mikhailovich joined the chase, but the thief, though carrying a steaming samovar with flames shooting from its spout, ran like the wind, cursing Viktor Mikhailovich as he led the pack. But the real loser was the building's janitor. He lost his nightly tips, no gates, nothing to open, and no reason for latecomers to tip him. At first, the janitor would ask when the gates would be fixed, then he begged, and finally he started making vague threats. The Tenants Association sent written reminders. Things were getting tense, and a lawsuit was looming. Standing by the well, the fortune teller and the enthusiastic mechanic kept talking. With no treated railroad ties, Viktor Mikhailovich shouted across the yard, "It won't be a streetcar, it'll be a disaster." "When will it all end?" Elena Stanislavovna sighed. "We live like savages." "There's no end in sight. Oh, guess who I saw today? Vorobyaninov." Elena Stanislavovna leaned against the well, still holding her full bucket in midair, stunned. Went to the communal office to renew my workshop lease, walking down the hall. Suddenly, two guys come up to me. One of them looked familiar, like Vorobyaninov. He asks, "What used to be in this building?" I tell him, "It was a girls' school, then the housing office." "Why do you ask?" I say. He just says thanks and walks off. That's when I realized it was Vorobyaninov himself. What's he doing here? And the guy with him, handsome, definitely an ex-officer. And then I thought. At that moment, Viktor Mikhailovich noticed something unpleasant. He broke off, grabbed his can, and ducked behind the trash bin. Into the yard strolled the janitor from number 5, stopped by the well and looked around. Not seeing Viktor Mikhailovich, he looked glum. "Vidya the mechanic isn't here again?" he asked Alina Stanislavovna. "I don't know anything," the fortune teller replied. "Nothing at all." Flustered, she dumped out her bucket and hurried inside. Janitor patted the cement side of the well and headed for the workshop. 2 steps past the entrance to the mechanic's workshop sign was another, Mechanic's Workshop and Primus Repairs, with a heavy lock hanging below. The janitor kicked the lock and muttered, "Gangrene." He stood there for 3 minutes, seething, then ripped down the sign, carried it to the well, stood on it, and started yelling. "Thieves live in your house," he shouted. "Scum, you snake, with your fancy education. I don't care about your education, damn you." At that moment, the snake with an education was sitting behind the trash bin, miserable. Windows flew open with a bang, and the tenants peered out, grinning. Curious passersby wandered in from the street. Seeing his audience, the janitor got even more fired up. "Mechanic, aristocrat, dog," he yelled, mixing in plenty of choice words. The women crowding the windows were outraged but didn't budge. "I'll smash your face in," the janitor raged. "Educated, are you?" Just as the scene reached its peak, a policeman arrived and silently started dragging the janitor away. Some guys from Quick Pack helped. The janitor clung to the policeman's neck and burst into tears. The danger passed. Viktor Mikhailovich, finally free, popped out from behind the trash bin. The crowd buzzed. "Jerk," he shouted after the departing group. "I'll show you, scoundrel." The sobbing janitor didn't hear a word. They carried him off to the station, and the Mechanic's Workshop and Primus Repairs sign went along as evidence. Viktor Mikhailovich kept grumbling. "Bastards," he told the onlookers. "Think they're so important, jerks." "Oh, give it a rest, Viktor Mikhailovich," Alina Stanislavovna called from her window. "Come up for a minute." She set a saucer of compote in front of him, and pacing the room, started questioning him. "I'm telling you it was him, no mustache, but it was him," Viktor Mikhailovich shouted as usual. "I know him well, Vorobyaninov's spitting image." "Keep your voice down, why do you think he's here?" A sly smile crept across Viktor Mikhailovich's dark face. "Well, what do you think?" He smirked even more. "Whatever it is, it's not to sign contracts with the Bolsheviks." "You think he's in danger?" Viktor Mikhailovich's 10 years of revolutionary irony were inexhaustible. His face played through a whole series of skeptical smiles. "Who in Soviet Russia isn't in danger, especially someone like Vorobyaninov? You don't shave off your mustache for nothing, Alina Stanislavovna." "He's been sent from abroad?" she asked, almost breathless. "Absolutely," the genius mechanic replied. "So why is he here?" "Don't be a child. Still, I have to see him. Do you know what you're risking?" "Oh, I don't care. After 10 years apart, I have to see Ippolit Matveyevich." She really did feel that fate had separated them back when they were in love. "Please, I beg you, find him. Find out where he is. You're everywhere, you can do it. Tell him I want to see him. Do you hear me?" The parrot in red underpants, dozing on his perch, was startled by the commotion, flipped upside down and froze. "Alina Stanislavovna," said the mechanic, standing and pressing his hands to his chest, "I'll find him and get in touch." "Would you like some more compote?" the fortune teller asked, touched. Viktor Mikhailovich ate the compote, gave a grumpy lecture about the parrot's poorly designed cage, and said goodbye to Alina Stanislavovna, advising her to keep everything strictly secret.